My opponent's first point is that prisons are a catch-22. He says that they abuse the money, and this happens in both the public and private sector. The private sector is a big problem. Though, the ThinkProgress.org explains that 3 major private prison companies have spent $45 million on campaigns so that they get more people in prisons and thus get more profit. This is directly from the private prisons and can be changed through reform of getting rid of private prisons but not prisons altogether. He says that they have cut rehab programs, and yes, this has happened in the past, but now it's changing. The Bureau of Prisons drug treatment program is an expanding one and continuing to be refined for the public to be best protected. We shouldn't stop an expanding program. We should allow it to expand even more. Also, the 28% statistic he gave from the University of Southern Alabama is from 2004. This is an outdated source. The 77% recidivism rate statistic he gave is only from 30 out of the 50 states. We don't get the view of the whole United States, only 30 of them. Plus also, we can reduce recidivism rates with rehab and prisons and drug treatment programs. The National Institute of Justice claims this. Poverty has increased because of prisons is what my opponent says. But if you do the crime, you have to pay the time, and we have to take people who commit crimes into prisons. But even so, if we have the alternatives, it'll still take people away from their families when they're in the alternative rehabilitation centers. So there's still the problem. And also, second, legality. Cornell says that the 8th Amendment requires prisons to have minimum standard of living. It doesn't mean that it needs to be comfortable. Also, solitary confinement is legal under the Supreme Court. There are certain requirements on it, but it is still legal and they can still be used. It is not a violation of rights, as it is still legal to use. Brown v. Plata still has prisons. It did decrease the amount of prisoners which they can have in the California, but it still does have prisons, and it shows that prisons are still needed. The HG Legal Sources says that prisoners do have the right to complain about prison conditions to both prison officials and courts. There's a person in Iowa who won $7,000 because of suing on prison conditions. They can sue. There is the ability for the prisoners to sue. Now on to the rebuttal. The Supreme Court decides whether something is legal or not. They have never said that prisons are illegal. They have said certain parts of them are, but not the whole prisons altogether. Also, he says that since the resolution is moral, he doesn't need to prove that it's feasible. But thus, if we abolish prisons, there needs to be another alternative in place which is feasible, so thus he does need to prove this. He says we need to stop crimes before they're committed. With rehab, but we don't have to abolish prisons for this to happen. We can have both rehab and prisons at the same time, as the program is even expanding now, as I said earlier. He said we can stop crime prematurely, so prisons are not needed as much, but even in the sentence, it shows that there is a need for prisons. He said that people with life sentences are broken and we should fix them with rehab, but my opponent's basically saying that we should let murderers back on the streets if they go to rehab. But I don't decide whether they get a life sentence. The legal system does. There need to be an alternative which can deal with people who have life sentences, and there isn't one. So thus we need to not abolish prisons and vote on the negation. He talks about building remodeling, but this would cost a lot of money. He says I'm throwing away people currently with the prison system. I'm not, because there needs to be a punishment for the crime which is committed. And also with the rehab programs expanding, prison is the best option. Also with private prisons, corruption is worse than public prisons is what my opponent claims, but this is not true. They are not trying to get a profit. The public prisons are not, but private prisons are. Their main goal is profit. Private prisons employees receive 58 less hours training than public prisons because they're trying to gain money. And also, according to the New York Times, private prisons in a study of 5 out of 8 of the prisons will not take people with severe illnesses or mental health because of the high cost of them. Also, according to Sentencing Project, in Arizona, it didn't save any money with private prisons. They actually ended up losing money from it. This is from the whole state of Arizona. What we see is that there are not benefits from private prisons, and thus we get rid of them and see the benefits from public prisons. Thus, I urge you to negate the resolution. Thank you very much for judging.